Hello everyone. This is Dr. Chiranjeevi Manike, Professor and Head of Data Science and Cybersecurity Department, MLR Institute of Technology, Hyderabad. As part of data mining video lecture series, we have completed the 2 units of syllabus. Now we are going to enter into the 3rd unit. So 3rd unit, we have the classification concepts. In this lecture, we are going to discuss what is classification and how does the classification works. So let us see in detail, classification models. So there are, based on the data that we are supplying, that is to teach the models, that is mainly divided into the 3 major categories like a supervised learning, unsupervised learning, reinforcement learning, etc. Let us, in this we are going to concentrate more on this supervised and unsupervised learning. So what do you mean by the supervised learning? So whatever the example we discussed, like bank loan approval in the previous slide, so that is the best example of a supervised learning. So supervised learning means, so we are supplying the data, with the class labels. That means each class, each sample class label we will mention and supply that as a training data, so that the model will be built based on the correlation between the correlation between the different attributes and the target label. So that means, like, so for example, in this diagram image, you can see here there are like input labeled data. This is the input labeled data we are going to supply to the machine learning model. So this labeled data, that means we are supplying the image data. Each image is labeled with its name, like a cat image and a dog, cat, dog, etc. So we labeled each image. So then we train the model. So that model will understand how the dog color would look like, how the nose, or how the face, and how the overall structure, how its tail look like, how the ears look like. So this kind of features will be understood. So that means if it will identify all the dog images, and it will also understand what are the features that mean irrespective of in terms of the structure, etc. But actually in machine learning, this analysis would be done in terms of suppose if it is image data, then that image data would be represented in the form of pixels, so that we will analyze the pixels based on the color intensity values. So here we are not going to discuss in detail. So this is the data, labeled data. Labeled means, like a previous example, we label the data, that is whether the loan application is, the loan decision is a risky or a safe or etc. Similarly, in this case, we supplied the image data with the label like a cat, dog, etc. So like similarly, like suppose if you want to teach to the children, right? Children or LKG or UKG children's. So you would show some images and we will tell this is a dog, and we'll show some other image like a cat and a rat, etc. If we'll give such kind of training, so that the kids will try to memorize how the cat look like and how the dog would be, so that you could remember, you could understand what are the features and how the structure and how the color and how the face, like all these features. If you show the images and the tell this is a cat, this is dog, like that, they will understand, they will build some a knowledge based on that. And so that if you show an image and of any cat without any label, if you ask could you please identify what is this, like this, so then they will try to identify based on the knowledge they acquired from the previous training. So we have to train. So similarly, so we give the training data. That means training means a labeled data, that is each sample would be labeled, class label would be attached to each sample. So then it will identify the correlationship. So then if you supply any image, like suppose in this case, like suppose if you supply this cat image, so then it will identify based on the features, it will identify it's a cat. If you supply the dog, it will identify it's a dog. So that is a supervised. We are giving the labeled data. That means we are so that is the way we are teaching. Like if a cat, if this is a cat image and the features would look like this. If it is a rat image, the features would look like this. Next, coming to the another category, that is unsupervised learning. Unsupervised means it's a completely, that means there will be no labeled class label. Like suppose here, and if you take this example, and there is no class label, if you class label for this unsupervised learning, that means we'll teach the model without supplying the class labels. So then the model would try to group the objects, like based on, like suppose these are the how the object would be grouped means based on the values of attributes. Like suppose here this data set has 4 attributes, like a sepal length, a sepal width, petal length, and petal width. So based on the values, each attribute have a set of values, possible values. So based on that, it would group the objects or the samples. Let us say there are 150 samples in this data set, and these samples would be grouped into the n number. N means that is, suppose if you want 5 groups or if you want 6 groups, like that, it will be grouped accordingly. So here you can see here. So this is the data, like that is unsupervised learning. If you use unsupervised learning like a clustering algorithm, then it would group the data points. If you plot the data on this 2-dimensional space, and it would group the data points like this, like so red iris setosa, and these are the green color, you could label with iris virginica, and this. If you could observe this, and what is the values, like 4.5, 5.5, like there are sepal length, sepal width, petal width are measured, right? These were numeric values. So the value of this category, like iris virginica, is little bit more, that is more than the 5. And if you could observe this third category, iris versicolor, and it's the value is more than 5.5, like that. So this is the way we group the object based on the values of the attributes into the different clusters. So this is, so if you once we have done the clustering, that is a grouping of objects based on the attribute values. So if you supply any new sample, that means, for example, if you have supply a sample like a sepal length, a sepal width, the petal length, and petal width, so based on these values, it will check to which group that particular sample belongs to. Let us say this group is labeled with A, and this group is labeled with B and C, like this. So then we will if you supply a new sample, then based on it will compare the values, that is sepal length, sepal width, petal length, and petal width, and it would classify the which category that particular sample belongs to. So this is unsupervised learning. So the first step of this classification process can also be viewed as a learning of mapping or a function. As I said, y is equal to f of x. So that can predict the associated class label y of a given tuple x. So in this view, we wish to learn a mapping or a function that separates the data classes. So typically, mapping is represented in the form of a classification rules, decision trees, or mathematical formula. So classification accuracy. As we discussed, the classification, it's a 2-step process. The first learning and the second classification. So once the learning happens, then we will test the model. So then we'll build the classification accuracy. So if you were to use the training set to measure the classifier's accuracy, this estimate would likely to optimistic, because the classifier tends to outfit the data. That is, during the learning, it may incorporate some particular anomalies of the training data that are not present in the general data set. Therefore, a test set is used that is made up of the test tuples and their associated class labels. So they are independent of training tuples. That means they were not used to construct the classifiers. We'll see later of what is this overfitting and underfitting, etc. So how the data, like whatever the data we are going to use to build the model and test the model, that is to check the accuracy. So like suppose if the data set, original data has some attributes, and that data set, like this is one function in this Python we use to split the data set into the training and testing. So this suppose if you supply this original data x train and x test and original data, it is going to split the data set into this parts like this one. So x train, y train, x test, y test. So this x train, y train would be used to train the model. And this is used for testing. That means we'll train the model so that we'll supply this in case of supervised learning. We have to supply this target value so that it will understand the correlation between the x1, x2, and so on, xp and y. Then the model, a decision tree or the math function, or it could be anything. So once it is done, then we have to test. So while testing the model, and this is the information, like a test data would be given without class labels. So like for example, these are the two samples supplied to test the model. So it would predict some values. Let us say this is one value that would be predicted for each sample. So now we'll compare with what actual values. So let us say these are the actual values, and this comparison would be done. So how many are correct or classified, or how many are misclassified. So based on that, we will calculate the accuracy. So we use the different formulas to find out the classification accuracy. Like for example, here there are different measures. Like this is the actual class labels, and these are the predicted class labels. Like actual class labels, the positive, negative, and there are like positive, negative, yes, no, or it could be anything. Label could be anything, yes, no, or approved, or risky, or safe, or whatever it may be. So next, and there will be like the number, the total number that is belongs to this category, like positive, predicted positive, and the actual is positive. Those are called as the true positive values. And predicted, the positive, and the predicted negative, and the actual values are positive. These are called as a false negatives. And this is one kind of error, that is type 2 error. Next, similarly, the false positive, that means the actual value is negative, but the model predicted as a positive, that is false positive. And this is another kind of error, type 1 error. Next, true negatives, that means predicted value is negative and the actual value is also negative. So these are only the important, but these are the errors. So we have to focus more on these two also. So now based on this, we would calculate the precision, that is the total, the true positive over the true positive plus false positive. These are the different formulas. Later we will discuss and we'll calculate all the values. So let us just quickly understand how we are gonna calculate this accuracy. So like suppose if you take a class, let us take male and female are the actual values, male and female, and m dash represents the predicted male, and f dash. So these are predicted, and these are the actual values. So now let us say like suppose 50 and some 39, so 20, 15. So from this you can easily understand how the accuracy we would calculate it. So here this is the actual, this 50, let us say the 50 are actually male, but this model is also predicted as a male, so that is true positive. So true positive, this is the first category. So that means how many are 50? Okay, the precision, you can see the true positive versus false positive. So then we'll get the precision. Next, similarly, and this is also, this is actual 39. So these 39 are the female, and those are predicted as a female by our model. So that is also true negative, true negative. So, and these are the misclassification. These are the errors. So this error should be minimized. That means, like, suppose let us say some 57 out of, right, 57 out of 50 are classified as a male. That means still the 7 are misclassified as a female. Similarly, if there are some 45 female but only 39 are classified as female, so then 6 samples are misclassified. So this is a way we find the accuracy, we calculate the accuracy of classifications. So we will discuss in detail of all this because this is an introduction. So let us quickly summarize before we close the session. So we have discussed what is a classification, so classification task, and we have seen the examples of application, different applications of a classification. The categories of the types of classifications, mainly the numeric and categorical types. And we also discussed how the classification works. So classification is a two-step process. Classification is a two-step process. The first step, learning. Second one is a classification. Then we also discussed about the types of learning. In this we discussed one is the supervised learning. Another one is unsupervised learning. So supervised learning means we use the data set with the class labels, whereas this unsupervised without a class labels. Thank you for watching this video.